Hey there, and welcome to the Total Potential Podcast. Cole here today with a mama I'm so excited to talk to, Chloe Puff of Chloe Puff Training. And I'll introduce you in a second, Chloe, but thanks so much for being here with me. I'm always so happy to connect with moms who have a meaningful message and are really committed to doing this work with intention and purpose. And so I can't wait to dive in with you. But just to introduce Chloe a little bit, Chloe is a certified personal trainer. She's a business owner. She's a mom of two. Hello, welcome to like all the fun, right? She has a background as a professional dancer for the likes of Nick Jonas and Nicki Minaj. Like, that's pretty cool. But now really is focused on the fitness space and body positive advocate, along with that. I love that. I can't wait to get into this part of like the pre and postpartum, like that whole area of
Yes.
fitness. That's so delicious. But now spend your time like doing that kind of meaningful work. So I'm interested to know, number one, how you got started in dance, and number two, how that eventually transitioned into this fitness space.
Awesome. Yeah, I I started when I was 3 and I have my favorite memory dancing. I have tape recordings of me like yelling at my mom, "I don't want to go to ballet." It's funny because growing up I asked to dance. My parents signed me up and then I was always complaining about going. And I originally was like a bun head. I did all the technical styles of dance until I was about like, I want to say like 14 or 15 was like my first hip hop class. Now, little like side note, I'm going to say hip hop for the sake of what I grew up learning in, but I highly recommend that, if you're listening to this, that there, with the shift of Black Lives Matter, it's important to understand where hip hop came from. And I'm just going to use it in the sense of commercialized dance, like the
Yeah.
things that you see, on the Grammys and things like that. So
Yeah.
just a little side note, but
Yeah.
I took my first class when I was 15. And from there, I actually went with that teacher and started, I ended up kind of being like his protege, and I started training with a group called PG Fam when I was a teenager, and we like did competitions and all those sorts of things like in more of an industry sense. And after just seeing what dance could really be and that it could be a career path and it wasn't just a pastime, I eventually made the shift when I was around 19 years old to move to LA, which
Okay.
was a big deal because I didn't want to go, actually.
Oh,
I had
really?
no desire to live there.
So
But
interesting.
I felt like it was necessary for me to develop my skills as a choreographer and coach, to be able to understand what the goal is for my students to be able to get there, if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to put myself in the position that I had experience to speak from, and not just, I know what I'm doing, but I haven't really been in that position. And I was
Right.
16 when I started teaching. So it was a lot
Yeah.
of trial and error. So I wanted to
Yes.
get some life experience. And long story short, after like learning all the ups and downs of the dance industry, it confirmed for me that, I love dance. I love dancing for myself.
Hmm.
I don't love having my livelihood depend on whether or not I can book a job. And I realized I really liked being on the creative side of things. And so I came back after wanting to start a family. And that was, I think I spent like 3 or 4 years in LA.
Okay.
Came back. I actually linked back up with the person who originally trained me in PG Fam and became the director of his studio.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I started mentoring dancers of all ages, being able to become smart young professionals. And since a huge chunk of dancers are women, it was very important for me to already instill, these ideas of when you go to the industry, you're out dancing professionally. It's like one of the very few jobs where you can get hired or fired based on your appearance,
Hmm.
which to me just like, it's one of the things that just didn't sit well with me. And I'm glad that things are shifting a bit
Mm-hmm.
in the industry. But that I think eventually was a huge part of me being in fitness for women, was breaking down these stereotypes and these expectations for women based off of their physical appearance.
Yeah.
And so that mentorship, after I had kids, I realized that there was a huge lack of this type of mentorship for women who were really struggling with their bodies, which would be pre through postpartum. I personally felt like I never had any support when I was pregnant or, after giving birth. My OB like knew the medical side of stuff, but then, the healing part, it was like, all right, let's focus on your baby now and let's just forget about you. And I just had to figure it out essentially.
Yes.
And through trial and error, it kind of led me to what I'm doing now, which is fitness. And what's nice is that fitness is the umbrella in which I can reach moms and athletes. And so for me, that kind of tied it together where I'm able to, I feel like I can do it all now as far as being able to still, be a dancer, but also be an advocate for moms. So that's kind of the long version of
it's amazing
how I got into it.
Well, and I mean, it's important, right? Because it's like the work becomes so much more meaningful when there is this kind of arc of understanding, right? Of what
Absolutely
led us to a place where you really feel passionate about pursuing something. And, I'm imagining myself as a client of yours, like just even hearing the way you talk about this and just knowing, how important it is to you and how much potential you see in that space. And it's exciting to be around people who have, that mindset and that drive. I love also so much, and I would really like to just like peel this apart because I've had 3 kiddos and every single pregnancy totally different, like not super my favorite experience. I mean, I know people
Same.
who love being
Same.
pregnant. I did not happen to be one of those people.
Same. I did not love it.
And then you are in a postpartum body that still, especially if you're nursing, like still doesn't really feel like it totally belongs to you again. That's my own words for describing that
Absolutely.
sensation. But then there's all this pressure, and you see it in the media all the time, like so and so had a baby, and look at her 2 months later at the whatever award show or whatever. And it sets up really a terrible spiral for women of what we quote unquote think is expected of us. And
Absolutely.
number one is ridiculous. And number two is just so like, you just became a mother, like you gave life to a human being. Like, let's focus on the things that are just so precious about this time. So let's get in there, like peel that back. What does that look like? Especially since you're in a space where you're working with women with this all the time. What does some of that look like? Some of the challenges, some of the,
oh man, it's yeah. Ooh, talk about peeling this apart. I could talk about this topic alone for days on end.
Yes.
One thing that I think is very important and things that I'm very grateful to see from celebrities now in the online space. I'm really hoping I'm thinking of the right people. I know Katy Perry, Hilary Duff, I want to say Pink. Those are all people who have, at least from what I've seen, show them like, breastfeeding in the dressing room as they're getting glammed up. Like those types of things are so important. I think an example, at least, of how I want to show up in that space is being completely transparent and honest. And that's why, on my Instagram, I'm very open with my struggles with mental health and postpartum depression and what my body looks like. And even though I'm strong, I still have tons of loose skin, and just setting realistic expectations, because there's so much in the media, of people who have lots of money and lots of resources and lots of help and lots of surgery sometimes. Mm-hmm. These, it sets an unrealistic precedence for like what to expect. Like they really should rewrite what to expect when you're expecting and make it all about, Instagram versus reality, because that's it, to me, that was the most shocking. Like, just learning things about, I didn't know what diastasis recti was. And I was an athlete. So I was shocked when I struggled to heal postpartum when I was so active. Mm-hmm. But I think I think my big challenge with clients is helping them not learn how to fix their bodies, but how to unlearn the expectations of society based on what they should or shouldn't be, X amount of time postpartum. I think it's, there's women who are lucky enough to just look like they were never pregnant. And there's some that look like they're still 5 months pregnant years after giving birth. And I think it's important for everybody, especially my clients who reach out to me, to understand this is what reality is. And this is what you've been seeing, and how to move past that with confidence.
Yeah.
I'm excited that this podcast is brought to you by mkforhealth.com. Have you been looking for a powerful antioxidant to help support your immune health? Hello, of course we have. Look no further. mkforhealth.com offers an amazing product called Nutrimetrics Opc3. This product is an isotonic-capable food supplement chock full of powerhouse antioxidants. Ingredients like citrus extract bioflavonoids, bilberry, grapeseed, red wine, and pine bark extracts, all incredible antioxidants. Then you have the OPCs. The oligomeric proanthocyanidins are bioflavonoids found in fruits, vegetables, and certain tree barks that have exceptional benefit to the human body. Studies have shown that these OPCs are up to 20 times more powerful than vitamin C and 50 times more powerful than vitamin E in neutralizing free radicals. Hello, sign me up for that. Nutrimetrics Opc3 also contains the only isotonic form of pygaginol in the world. Number 1, remember, isotonic, readily absorbed. Number 2, pygaginol, my new favorite word, is a natural plant extract from the bark of a French maritime pine tree, and it is the most clinically researched and potent bioflavonoid found. If you're ready to support your immune health and modulate inflammation in your system, all with incredible powerhouse antioxidants, natural extracts, and ingredients, this is your product. Go to www.mkforhealth.com to purchase your Nutrimetrics Opc3 today. That's www.mk4health.com.
Well, even in toddlerhood, I mean, I remember thinking like, I still didn't have a body that I recognized. I don't have the language to articulate like the sensation of how that feels really specific.
I completely understand. Like what you said is like, it's almost like your body is just like a tool, like you just existing to help your child survive, whether you're breastfeeding or you're physically like removing them from danger, cooking them a meal. It just kind of feels like you're just like, all right, I'm a vessel. That's it. Where am I in all this?
Yeah. Well, and I'd be so interested to know, because like my own experience was that once I was in that, I mean, especially after I knew I was done having kids, once I knew, our daughter was born, we were 3 and out, like I'm tapped, we're good. I think that phase was maybe even the most challenging, because I knew that like from there on forward, this was the body I was living in. Like it wasn't going to be going through another pregnancy or nursing or whatever. And something that really shifted my own personal experience was moving from that it just never mattered enough to me to look a certain way. Like it didn't pull enough energy to commit to the practices and the movements and getting enough sleep. Like it just was not enough to pull me. And it wasn't until I had a way bigger reason to move my body that I was able to really dive all the way in. So what does that look like is that an experience you see often, or are there other, parts of the challenge of getting over that hump of like, I'm not trying to get back to a body that I used to live in. I'm trying to live in this body for a reason.
Yeah. Well, and that's really insightful. And not a lot of people who come to me have that same perspective. It's really important to have the perspective of acceptance, to be able to say like, this is my body. How can I honor this body? Because once postpartum, always postpartum. You're never not postpartum after you have kids. So it's just, it's just a different phase of life. And I think taking the language, like, I think there's this concept that having kids ruins your body.
Mm.
And I think I can understand where that comes from. In the same sense, I feel like having kids like reshapes you more than just physically. It like really, it's something that only mothers or childbearing humans can possibly understand, because, it's kind of one of those things like you don't know until it happens to you. And for what I see usually is one of two things. It's either a woman who really never pursued fitness before, wasn't interested, had kids, realized how like out of shape they were, in the sense that, they had back pain when they're trying to breastfeed their kids, and they're just not feeling fully functional in their bodies. Like their bodies are not working well for them. Or, which would be more in line with like my journey, is being super fit and super aware of, the physical and being judged on the appearance and the aesthetic. And then all of a sudden having that almost ripped away from you, and just like scrambling to try and figure out how the heck do I put this back together? So the nuances of that are going to differ from person to person. And I think it's important that instead of like, I think for me, I think of it like this, like the timeline is there's your pre-baby existence, and then there's motherhood, and they're not linear. They're like two separate islands. You can look back at that, that other space and say, I think the perspective is looking back on that other time in your life, instead of saying, I wish I could be that again. You can just look at that and feel like that chapter is closed and appreciate it for what it is. Now it's about learning how to make this area of your life flourish and work for you, because you're never going to get back there again. So it's about shaping what you have currently. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest challenge for people, is to accept that human no longer exists. You can't undo motherhood. Yeah. Mentally, physically, whatever.
And for the vast majority of us, I mean, I think it's an important realization that we would never want to undo motherhood, right? Like
exactly.
We opted into motherhood. And so wanting to be back on that other island was missing the thing we wanted most. Like it would be heartbreaking for many of us to be back on in that other space that was us before. It's missing, the most precious thing that so many of us are lucky enough to have.
Yeah. And I'll say this too, like for the women who have had babies and lost babies, or the women who didn't intend to get pregnant, and, their bodies, whether or not you desired motherhood, your body will reflect that. And I think that's one of the more like touchy topics that I think is also really important to understand, like, because that can be a really painful experience for a woman to look at their body, but not have the child or the life they envisioned that their body is showing. And so I think it's what I aim to do. And I'll try and summarize this. Like my only goal is to help you claim ownership over your body, and to be able to advocate for it, and to accept the here and now. So I'm not a therapist, but in a lot of ways, like those are the things that I talk about with my clients, and, I'll refer them to therapists, just because the mental work and the mental aspect of, taking ownership of your body is difficult. And so that's a huge, huge portion of my job too, is being able to help women walk through why their relationship with their body is how it is, and how to change it moving forward.
Yeah. And even that's probably a mindset shift for a lot of people, that they are in relationship with their body.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, like there's a back and forth happening, not just a one-way street. Yeah. I think that's probably in and of itself an interesting mindset shift.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah. I'm so curious to know, in your experience, how does fitness play a role in coming into just a state of peace with your body?
Ooh, man, I just posted on my story while it was fresh in my mind. I don't know if it even loaded because I logged right on, but the concept of there's two different sides to fitness. There's the self-love and the confidence and the mentality aspect, and then the physical aspect of fitness, and thinking of the outcome as being the changed aesthetic. A lot of people will get into fitness for the reason of aesthetic. They want to work on the physical because they think it will change the internal, and vice versa. They want to work on the internal. So here's what I notice. The people who want to pursue fitness because they want to challenge themselves mentally, those are the people that usually will succeed longer term. The people who want to get into fitness because they are not happy with themselves physically, usually you haven't done the work mentally in order to sustain the physical difficulty. So that's why it's so important for me to be able to put the two together and work a lot on the mentality and the mindset and the behavioral changes and the habit building, because it's not about being motivated or unmotivated. It's really about like having an awareness that the two work hand in hand. So when you're starting this journey, you're also committing to learning more about yourself and unlearning some of those beliefs, those limiting beliefs that, society, your family of origin, all those things will create in you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I say this all the time. Our body cannot be separated from our mind, and our mind cannot be separated from our body.
They're one and the same.
Oh my goodness. But I think, it's really challenging, I think, for a lot of people to experience that in a tangible way until it suddenly, clicks.
Absolutely.
What would you say are some of those kind of common limiting beliefs that end up coming into your space?
I'll challenge you. I'll put that question back on you. I'll challenge you. What do you feel like when you were starting out were some of the things that held you back?
Oh, well, it's the same one I'm still working on all the time, which is I'm not good enough.
Yeah. I mean, that's that right there. That's the most common one. And usually whatever the answer is, it'll usually come back to that, which is I'm not good enough. And there's this lack of self-worth, which leads to a lack of self-efficacy. And so that is, I mean, that's the biggest limiting belief. I mean, if I could peel apart, I'm trying to think in my head, like all of the excuses that I've ever heard always come back to I'm not good enough. Like even not having time is saying you're choosing not to make time for yourself because you don't feel like you deserve it. Yeah. So even all of the excuses can be boiled down to, I think that one thing is that self-worth or lack thereof.
Yeah. Jake and I have been having this ongoing conversation about this. Like, how did, as humanity, basically, because as you're saying, right, this is like sort of a root limiting belief. How did we get to the space where all of us are walking around go with some nuance of I'm not good enough? I mean, it's just, and then how do we rectify that and change that for our children? That's where my wheels are spinning these days.
I think I might be able to answer that as far as what I feel is relevant now. As someone who has become more of a feminist over time, just seeing especially like the disparities in fitness and how uneven it is has really opened me up to all the, political disparities, in our government and our systems that don't allow women specifically to get the help that they need, even depending on race or demographic or whatever. I think, and I'm speaking on behalf of all women, I can't speak for men. This is my perception based on history and, what we know, that women have always been considered second-class citizens, whether or not we've had social media or the means to, see what's happening in the world. I mean, if you think about kind of the dynamic of even just like, the perfect woman back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, where there's, it's like the housewife, it's always, the dynamic has always been socially created to have this, like this misleveling of genders. Mm-hmm. And that's just based off what I've seen. And so how could we, as we're raised through these generations as a byproduct of these generations of women being oppressed or thought of slightly less than or extremely less than men, how how could we as an individual shift a mindset for an entire existence of a gender? I mean, that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself as a woman to say like, so I think I'm loving this time of social media, because while we are being exposed to a ton of negative stuff and a ton of things that are still unrealistic, maybe those people just haven't figured out their self-worth yet. Maybe their worth is in the appearances, and they still have a lot of work to do. We all do. And so for the people who don't have the looks or the aesthetic of this ideal, of course you're going to say, oh, well, I don't have what they have, so I'm still second best. And so I'm really, really happy that there are people on the opposite side of that who are very body positive, because I think the easiest way to access a shift in your mindset is through body acceptance. If you can accept your body at any size, you're freaking unstoppable. Like if you can truly like be like, I love this naked, jiggly, dimpled body, and I appreciate it for what it is. You don't have to be in love with it, but at least accept it. That is the first step to like really being able to find your self-worth. And that's why I'm happy that now with the explosion of social media, we're able to see the opposite side of that. Those people who are kind of, rubbing the sand out of their eyes and going, oh my gosh, okay, I can be body positive. I can change the narrative. And so that is why I think, women specifically have trouble finding their self-worth, is because it's been instilled in us for centuries.
Yeah, for sure. It has. And then, I mean, on the flip side of that, like I can't speak for men, right? Because I am not a man.
Right.
But then on the flip side of that, you have this falsehood of what manhood is that doesn't match for men either. And so that creates a impossible dynamic. Like we're both
absolutely,
we're coming at it from different sides of a coin, but man, it's
it's like the expectation is here for men and it's here for women when we both are in reality right here.
And so
I think it's like, okay, let's deflate the expectation here and let's inflate the expectation for women. And I think that, I mean, and you're right, I talk a lot about mental health, and since I'm not a man, I don't specialize in men's fitness and mental health, but I agree. I feel like there's not a space for men to just exist who they are. And, I don't understand why women need to be thin and men need to be bulky and huge. And, it's just very primitive to me. So
I love the use of that word.
Yeah.
As you walk individuals or even through your own journey, as like you really anchor into that acceptance of that physical being and cultivating the mental capacities that allow you to commit to that over time, what kind of transformations do you see in people?
Well, I will just use my most recent client, without using her name, of course, as an example. One of the biggest thing, I'm just so proud of her. Actually, she currently asked to take a little break because she's at a perfect spot right now. And like, I want her to be able to learn on her own. And so we were working together for, I want to say like 6 months. And when she came to me, she had tried every diet. She tried all the, programs. She was still, she had gained 50 pounds over the pandemic, but she was already overweight before that had happened. And there was a lot of, as I was talking to her over the months, it came very apparent that there was just a lot of like deeply rooted insecurity in her relationship with her mother, and how her mother spoke about her own body, how her mother spoke about her child's body. And it was always like, you're not good enough, or you're not thin enough. She used to be a child athlete, and knowing what that's like, and then, imagining the shift in your body, of course, that's going to affect you, because you're like, oh my gosh, like, how do I, again, just going back to the islands, it's like, how do I go back to, that body? And, her mom had this crazy expectation of her to be able to just snap back. And she's a grown woman with grown kids. So it was just really unrealistic. And so a lot of the work that we did was reshaping her thought process about how she nourished herself, and how, like, literally, like, we we just like scooped everything out and rebuilt. Like we talked about her relationship with food, her relationship with her mom. Obviously I'm not a therapist, so I stayed within my scope of practice and just, was there as a friend to listen and give my interpretation. And also just like, what movement qualifies as a workout, like even those types of things, like just debunking all these myths and these feelings. And the transformation was phenomenal. Like she only lost a couple pounds because we weren't really focusing on weight loss. When she originally came to me, she was like, I want to lose the 50 pounds I gained over the pandemic. And so what I presented to her was, what if this weight doesn't come off? Are you going to be okay with who you are? And she was like, oh, no.
Oh, she went
no.
there.
And so we took a step back because, like I said before, if you are not willing to peel back the layers of mental block that have held you back, you're never going to get to that physical goal. Or if you do get to the physical goal, you still have all this, like, these mental scars that are going to eventually bring you back to where you were. And so just seeing her transformation is like, she was walking her dog. She was enjoying movement. She was excited to move because she started to be able to see that she was capable. She took control over, being able to set boundaries with her mom when her mom brought up, uncomfortable things at holidays, like, oh, you're having seconds. You sure you want to eat that? And being able to put up boundaries and still at the end of the day, be proud of her body and not let those external factors affect her, which I think by far, she was probably to date the most mentally transformed client in the shortest span of time that I have ever had the pleasure of working with. It's so amazing to see women like really come into their own confidence. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. That confidence piece. And I think the boundaries for so many of us are another really important piece.
Absolutely.
And then, there's something you said a couple of times that I would be interested to know, like more how you shape women's experience with this, which is that language is more powerful than we give it credit for. And the way we speak to ourselves, the way others speak to us, and how we internalize that, how we then speak to our children, like that whole process is so formative.
Mm-hmm.
And even as you're describing this example, I'm imagining this person being able to say something different to herself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's life-changing. Like whatever, even if 2 pounds fall off, who cares? Like if your whole mental experience is a new way of being,
right,
the weight's going to fall off eventually anyway, right? Because now you have a new internal experience. Your external experience is going to begin to match that. But that language, we underestimate its power.
Yeah, I agree.
It's really crazy. And then I think about, and I'm sure you do too, like being as careful as I can and mindful as I can with my children on how, things about bodies and nutrition and just worthiness and so many different, nuances of just trying to feed them with words rather than like, remove pieces of their puzzle. I guess that's kind of a weird analogy, but
yeah,
I think of it.
I completely agree. I mean, having kids has made me much more mindful of how I speak about myself. I think part of my own journey was like, it's always that same experience. You never know you never know how good you had it until you lost it. And, prior to having kids, I was lifting 6 days a week and, cause I had time, which is fun. But, I never appreciated the body that I had. And I am glad that I have the body I have now. And I would never wish for that like tight toned body again, because it didn't really provide all of the good stuff for me mentally and, that internal change. And you're right you cannot build a house without a foundation. And if you do, eventually it's going to sink, topple over, whatever. But if you work on the foundation, the house is going to be much easier to build. And even if those little pieces fall off, you're not going to have to start over. You just, make it work as you go. And I completely agree with you there.
Yeah.
It's just,
I love that analogy to the foundation and building the house. It's really an important one. And get that strong foundation, because you're right. Then it's like you can even remodel at some point, like use the same foundation.
Absolutely. You should have. And that's why I think it's so important, because a lot of at least from what I've seen, a lot of like the programs and stuff out there, like it's great scientific information, but it seems to be designed for people who already have the tools and the means to be able to accomplish it, where there's a lot of people who just literally don't have a clue. Like they have the information, but they don't really know what to do with it. And so I think this is where dance has really, like dance and the mentorship aspect of what I was doing prior has really helped me, because I wasn't just teaching people what the moves were. I was teaching them, what the intention of it is and what the nuances were and what the impact of the choreography and, being a dancer is on your life, and how, even if you don't plan on being a professional dancer, how is this moment impacting you for the future? And so I think being able to take those tools and, what I've learned from people's learning styles, because I'm very thorough when it comes to like helping people grow. And so that is why not at this time, I don't just do programs that anyone can access, because I don't feel that for what I do and who I serve, it's the most beneficial. I feel like really getting into, what each individual's needs are to be able to build their own foundation, because it's going to look different for everybody. And then, some people take longer to build than others. And so cramming it in an 8-week program or whatever, it just doesn't work for my audience. Yeah. And so, building that foundation is essential to long-term sustainable change. Yes. That's the hardest part for a lot of people.
Yeah. Not change that just happens for now until the new year, but change that like gets to continue unfold and become, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you also have a podcast.
I do. It's new. It's a baby.
Yeah, I love it. And I love even the title of it, Muscles, Motherhood, Motivation. It's so into it. What are some of like the important messages you're hoping to share through that medium?
Yeah, I guess when I was like mapping this all out, I was like, I have so many things I want to talk about, and I don't want to limit it to just fitness, because there's so many, great podcasts with beautiful scientific information. I want to go on the opposite side of that and basically fill in the gaps where I felt it was missing for me in my journey. So, just encouragement in womanhood, period. Just being able to like find a space and hear, other people talk about their experiences as a woman from a woman's perspective, and how they've, overcome their adversities and things of that nature. Because, I just needed, when I was going through everything, I just wanted to hear that there was someone else out there like me struggling with the same things or similar. And I also wanted to feel inspired and empowered and motivated to just, spark my own change. And so really it's a broad mix of things.
Yeah.
I like to debunk fitness myths and talk about how to make sustainable changes and, body positivity and all that. My messaging is going to be like tough love in the most positive way.
I love that. Tough love in the most positive way. That might be like, I might make a poster of that in my house.
Do it. If you make a t-shirt, send it my way.
Yeah, right. That's so awesome. When you think about kind of a longer arc of this work, and even like your children watching you, over the years work in this way, what do you hope is like their takeaway from it?
That is a very heavy, in the best way, question. I just want my kids to fail And what I mean by that is I want them, and this is why I hide nothing from my kids. I don't hide tears from my kids. I obviously, filter what's going through to my kids so they're not exposed to things they don't need to hear yet. But
Yeah.
I think just like being really raw and honest and setting an example and allowing them to see my life will either teach them to be bold and go after the things that, they want to try and understand that failure is a part of the process and that it's okay. Versus, you always got to win. You got to win. Cause I feel like I learned way more from my losses.
Yeah.
And they'll either want to be like me or be nothing like me and learn from my mistakes. And so either way, it's a win-win to be able to just, I'm trying to, if I'm going to screw up my children, I'm going to do it as passively as possible. I'm just going to allow them to look at, what's going on in my life and learn from my mistakes. And so my hope is that they're inspired to be active because, it is very transformational mentally to move your body. And so far, so good. They love to box with me, which is great. And
cool.
Exercise with me. We have dance parties. And other than that, I want them to have a positive foundation for when they come to that age where body image becomes a thing. I want them to be able to have the tools to understand the truth of their value and not only place it in, comparison.
Yeah.
Motherhood is a trip.
It really is. And
let's not screw up our kids. Okay.
I know. Well, and I worked with a social worker. I used to work in a children's hospital, and I worked with a social worker who was just like maybe the sweetest woman I've ever known. And she said the best parents are good enough because you actually need to fail in some areas of parenting because otherwise your children have no skills, right? They have no way to enter the other weird things that are going to happen in the world just as like part of life. And so that has always just stuck with me. Like the best parents are good enough. I
love that. I love that so much.
Yeah. If we were perfect, we'd actually be failing them massively.
Yep.
So we'll take good enough any day of the week. Yeah. Well, I'm just so glad to have had the chance to talk to another mom who, the work you're doing is really important. And I think there's so many women who are desperate for a new way of being and a new way of thinking about what's possible for them. And the type of work that you're doing allows that to take place. So I thank you for the work that you're doing and the chance to chat with you today about it. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, social media is everywhere.
Yes.
I go by Chloe Puff, which is my maiden name and an excellent business name. So Chloe Puff anywhere. If you look on chloepuff.com, you can find me there. If you search Chloe Puff in your Apple Music or Spotify, you'll find my podcast, Muscles, Motherhood, and Motivation. Find me on Instagram, Chloe Puff Training. And, if not, then just call out to the universe and I'm sure we'll find a way.
Our paths will cross, right? Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. Manifest.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chloe. I appreciate your time today and I appreciate everyone listening, spending some time with us, and we will catch you next time.